might like, called Dark Journalists. I just thought y'all might like it. But if you haven't yet, subscribe down below, hit that like button, share this video, and all you people, all you guys out there that support the channel, God bless you all. I thank everybody. Let's take a look at this, see what we got in this video. Give me just a second, get it over here. All right, here we go, guys. Get it up here. Put it to the screen. Sorry.
Hello everyone, this is Dark Journalist with a very special Part 2 episode with former Assistant Housing Secretary Catherine Austin Fitts. Now in Part 1 we covered the upcoming election and the forces trying to create chaos for control purposes. In Part 2 we'll go even deeper, looking at the real fight for the future being waged worldwide by a deep state transhumanist agenda that seeks to manage humanity like livestock, with tracking devices and satellite control from a massive space infrastructure designed to put a global control grid in place. Will we see it in time to change the outcome? Here we go, Catherine Austin Fitts, The Fight for the Future. Catherine, it's great to have you back with us. Now, let's start with how important is this election that's coming up here on November 3rd?
Well, I think to Americans, there are big incremental differences. But I think if you look at the trend and direction, there is significant investment underway to pull the United States apart and to make a fortune on doing to the United States a sort of high-tech version of what was done to Russia when Russia came apart. And so if you look at the forces arrayed to grab, there's a land rush going on in the United States. And that land rush has been going on for a couple of years, ever since the election started. And there's no indication to me that either faction intends to stop it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think whoever wins the election, the acceleration of that land rush and the acceleration of the disaster capitalism. I mean, we have the Federal Reserve printing trillions of dollars, so think of it this way. So you have Main Street, which has been shut down, and they're spending their savings down. And then you have the private equity firms and the insiders who are grabbing massive amounts of cash flow and market share and getting 0% cost of capital to buy everything up cheap. I mean, I'll give you a perfect example. I just had one great ally in France write me and say, all the French businesses that applied for the equivalent of the PPL loans in France were required to put all their financials and documentation into an Amazon cloud.
Wow.
What do you think is going to happen to them?
Right.
So they've been thrown into a debt trap, and now, all the database has all their confidential information, and the private equity guys are getting 0% cost of capital to come in and pick them off.
It's fantastic.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're watching a leveraged buyout of the planet. So these guys have been thrown into a debt entrapment and are being drained, and these guys have free play money to buy them up. What do you think is going to, it's a takeover.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Right. And the problem with the whole thing is it's got a negative return on investment because you have, I always say people who win in a rig game get stupid.
Right.
Crime pays, crime grows but it continually knocks the productive out of the system. And at some point, you've got a very centralized, very fragile system. It's basically, it's if everybody who wins because they can kill with impunity, that's what you're going to get. You're going to get killers, who can only keep on killing to keep winning. So you're going to have a spiral down. You have a negative return on investment. Now, what some people say is that the new technology is so wonderful it can make up for all of that and more. We'll see.
Continuity of government used to be something that was in the background. I learned about it from Professor Scott. And we did some shows on it in 2014, and I've always been curious about it. And he made it kind of a center point where really nobody else ever did. This year, they've had two different COG commanders,
right?
And they've had them out there talking about COG. One of these guys is General Van Herk, by the way, and he's from the 509th, which is the same group as the Roswell bomber group, by the way.
Right.
But he's an unusual figure. But more than that, in any particular general, they have to control Northcom and COG. That's what you get when you get the position. And North American Aerospace. So you control all three when you get that position. It's quite a position, actually. They had it.
Now, how does that relate to Space Force?
Well, it's interesting because the Space Force has space commanders, and they interact with the Air Force. So this does get kind of interesting as to who controls what.
We have to see where the budget money flows, because I'm assuming Space Force money still probably flows through the Navy.
Yes. Yeah, that's an excellent point.
That's my guess.
Fascinating. Well, these combatant commanders are certainly interesting enough to look at in terms of how they were chosen. I guess what really captures my attention now is that the media wants to talk about COG. After basically making it an untouchable subject for so long. So, for example, now we have Nancy Pelosi talking about getting her briefing from COG and how she's third in line for the presidency. Of course, when the COVID-19 issue hit, there was a Newsweek William Arkin article, a series of articles, talking favorably about a COG takeover. Suddenly they're doing a lot of what if trial balloons in the media about this. I want to ask you, what do you think of these different politicians and media companies suddenly strutting a COG around in public when in fact it requires a suspension of the U.S. Constitution? Now, previous to this, you couldn't get them to talk about it at all.
Well, I go back to the central bankers kicking something off that's highly fluid. So, again, extending the old and bringing on the new. It's clear there's a major effort to sort of pull the country apart. And the question is, how are you going to do that? And, if you play these games with the election, then if you're the generals and you're responsible to make sure the whole system has continuity of government, what are you supposed to do? I mean, the military is in a real pickle here because the civilian political parties make it look like it's okay to run around and play these games and act like children. But when you talk about the dollar system, you're talking about very sizable assets of the whole planet. And we don't get to turn the whole planet in a romper room and destroy their assets. And ultimately, the person that the world is looking to, is either the deep state guys running the FASB 56 budget or the generals or some combination thereof. And, so whether it's Lockheed Martin or the generals, you're looking to that system to be managed, under adult supervision.
Yes.
The reason the system hasn't fallen apart is they're assuming that system is under adult supervision somewhere way back when. If you scratch far enough behind the scene, you're going to get adults. Now, in my experience, they were major adults. They were very smart, they were very adult, and They planned, we had 100-year plans. So now more and more the people who are sort of shown to the public are not serious adults.
Right.
But if the party game and the effort to sort of engineer Civil War II gets absurd enough, then it's going to put the military in a real pickle. They cannot afford for the world to perceive that the system is not run by real adults. It's dangerous.
Yes, right. And we've allowed that danger to go on for a long time.
Right. And I assure you, it's not just the people in Washington.
Right.
No, the corruption now in the general population is very, very significant.
Well, that's a good point. Yeah.
It's very, very significant. And it's funny, I was watching Kennedy on a show with Rand Paul the other day. Ron Paul.
Yeah.
And I think they filmed it in August. And I'm used to, and I use this statistic a lot, that 54% of American children have chronic disease.
Yes.
And in fact, we had a wonderful internist on the Solari report who said, no, it's much higher. It's about 70%. She said a lot of the children can't afford to get properly tested.
Oh, yeah.
So she said it's really much higher. But Kennedy mentioned in connection with that statistic that, and I think he meant since the heavy schedules of vaccines have gone on, but IQs have fallen 7 points.
Oh.
So American children have lost 7 points in IQ. Now, you're talking about depopulation now. You're talking about people who can't make it.
Right.
Now, if you give them a smartphone and a universal basic income, they can live. But, you're talking about slavery.
Right. That's not much of a lie.
No.
It's interesting you mentioned RFK Jr. there. I had him on the show in June, and although we were talking about medical tyranny, he did in fact tell me that Bill Gates was very involved in the satellite industry.
Right.
Which I found interesting. You've got a space section in the report, and you talk about how important those satellites are for running everything on the ground, and that everything that they're going for, smart cities, etc., basically runs off that infrastructure.
Well, it's two. It's space, and I go back to the sea lanes. Because right now, one of the greatest battles on the planet, which I talk about, is the war for the South China Sea.
Yes.
If the U.S. loses, and it's one of the reasons we're seeing what's called the Quad emerge. If the Quad and the U.S. lose control of the South China Sea, that's a very big power shift. Very big. Never think that digital, ultimately control on this planet is physical.
Yeah.
And the people who control because they can kill with impunity. And satellites are very important, very useful, and digital systems are very important and very useful. But ultimately control is physical, and it comes down to the ability, to kill or to control physically. So the sea lanes aren't going away anytime soon, which is why my bet is the Navy probably, the budget for U.S. Space Force probably still rolls through the Navy, just like it did for the Air Force.
Fantastic. That's a real good point, actually. The CIA just celebrated their 73rd anniversary, set up under the National Security Act originally, and then added to it. You pointed out the Central Intelligence Act in 49 really gave them the carte blanche of what they could do, and largely extra-constitutional. And even the guy, President Truman, who set it up, felt that way. In November, we'll come up to 57 years since the Kennedy assassination. And in a sense, looking at those two anniversaries, we're kind of locked in the same dynamic.
And the CIA has gathered unto itself more and more power since then.
They had a period where they were sort of chastised in public and all the rest, but they came back like gangbusters in the 80s with Nicaragua and everything like that. But that paradigm, which you point out in the report, that's still with us. We're still duking it out between those two forces.
Well, but let's go back. My number one answered question is the same every year, which is who's really running things?
Yes.
Right. So in my experience, the CIA is basically the operational arm for the secret societies and private. It's the central bankers and their related secret societies. And they basically do their bidding. And the question is why? Why do they do what they do? Now, I think the way we put together the CIA and the way it evolved, there were some terrible errors in terms of designing a governance structure and checks and balances. But, it's spilled milk, and you've created a culture. You created a culture in and around the CIA, whether it was them or the sort of Wall Street money coming through, that was not necessarily good at playing long ball. And
Guys, there a while back when she was talking about depopulation, that's true. George Soros is a big player in that. He wants depopulation of the United States. Because they want to take more of the money away from those people that can't afford to live, and they're getting welfare or some kind of assistance. He wants to do away with that. So there's more money for the big people like George Soros himself, Bill Gates, all the 1%. And these big banks overseas and all these people, they want all the money. So they're creating chaos, or going to create chaos, or they are, along with the Democrat Party, to get complete control, get depopulation started, which is already going on. Because people can't afford medicine. They make it so high and out of reach that those people that depend on that to live can't afford it. And we as Americans should not let that happen. Whether you're rich, middle class, poor, whatever, you need to stick together, stand together, and fight back against this. This is pure and simple nonsense, and it's a complete takeover by these rich people. They want to take over everything. They want to control your life if you live or die. They want to control your food, whether you eat or not. They want to control your medicine. If you're rich, you get the medicine. If you can't afford it, you die. And that's basically what this is all about. Now, this video is long, and I'm not going to bore you with it, so I'm going to skip ahead a little bit and go to see what else is in here, because it's a really long video.
I would agree. I mean, I think it's interesting to concentrate on it in the way that you're looking at it, because you have a shot at answers.
Well, I told you the story. One of my favorite lunches, we had a lunch in Amsterdam. I don't know, it was 2015 or 16. And this wonderful guy who used to trade in the city of London came.
I'm skipping ahead.
And you pointed out that it only goes after people when they're protesting at like a Trump rally or something.
We had to keep it secret. So the question is why? Why did
Go back here just a little bit.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No question about it.
Rings of Saturn was when the more deepest and most valuable covenants and responsibilities to each other. And it started the ICBM missiles.
Wow. Yeah.
He said the guy was a CIA proprietor. He never found real oil.
Incredible.
Yeah, he just had government contracts.
Well, the invasion of Cuba was nicknamed Zapata, too, so that would make a lot of sense, actually. This is fascinating, though, because you have talked about the UFO file. You did bring it in. You have talked about underground bases. And you knew it would be kind of an ostracizing thing. If you go to talk on Bloomberg or something like that, and, you're talking about UFOs, and I've seen you on financial shows, you will talk about it. You say, well, what about UFOs? So that's it is part of that shift to see things as they really are and not as you can kind of accept them to be.
Well, here's the thing. You've got the only way we're going to find a pathway to a human civilization is one, to turn on the lights. It's like we're like a symphony orchestra trying to play in the dark,
right.
And it's not productive. So you got to turn on the lights. But the other thing you got to do is you've got to engage with many different people. So if you read The Saved Currency, what you realize, you're talking about all these different industries, all these different endeavors. You're talking about governments. You're talking about not-for-profits. You're talking about businesses. You're basically talking about everything. And so we've got to have a conversation with everybody, right?
Exactly.
We're going to have a conversation, and it's going to be the kind of conversation that supports and affirms, our deepest and most valuable covenants and responsibilities to each other. And it starts by really trying to figure out what's there. I'll never forget. Remember when we did the panel at the Secret Space Program in 2015? And we finally gathered for the last panel. It was a wonderful group. So we had Linda and Joseph and you, and we were just trying to figure out what's really going on. And it was such a rich conversation, and we kept.
And there is a secret space program. It's real secret. Not a lot of people know about it. But they're telling the truth, guys. This stuff about population control, trying the depopulation to get to thin out America and other countries too. It's just not America. But they want to thin America out mostly. George Soros does, because this is where all the money's at. And if they don't have to send out welfare checks to people that can't afford to eat, then that's more money in their pockets. That's more money for these crooked politicians in Congress and Senate. But there's a way we can fight back by sharing this. Let them know that we know what's going on, and we want it to stop. And we want it to stop now. This is literal crimes against humanity from this Democrat Party and their henchmen and these outside lobbyists influencing them to do it. This is why they're fighting so hard to get President Trump out of office, because they want a nation of just rich people. That's all they want. They want all the money. They're greedy. That's all it is greed. And it comes from the top of the Democrat Party, and I'm sure there's some Republicans in there. They're not clean, but mostly Democrats. And it's wrong. It's evil. This is something straight out of the Bible, guys. Nonsense, but hey, we're living in the end times. This is the end times, whether you believe it or not. This is the end times. And if you haven't got right with God, my advice is go get right with God. Accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior. Get baptized and try to stay clean, guys, because it's coming. It's inevitable. It's coming. Hold on, I'm trying.
Kept having ahas, learning from each other, things we hadn't known and connecting dots. So I started to explain to Linda how at the time that the Voyager passed the rings of Saturn, was when the mortgage fraud exploded. And I thought it was because they took one look at the thing in the ring and said, I need $20 trillion tomorrow. We're going to go.
To deal with that. Yes.
Right. And so the financial fraud was not greedy investment bankers trying to get Ferraris. It was, big alpha males terrified, that the thing in the ring was going to come kill us all.
Right. That's a key thing. Well, the Ringmakers of Saturn, Norm Bergeron, when he came out with that, and the way that you were able to lock in with it, he was a very respected scientist.
Well, that's a very carefully and beautifully written book.
Yes.
That book is written by a very serious person.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No question about it. So when you look at it that way, and then you think about them briefing Reagan in that period, and we know Reagan, he had, Gorbachev had this wonderful talk with pre-sex scandal Charlie Rose in New York at the press club and all this.
Right.
And,
right.
And Kissinger was there, and he said, and Gorbachev said, "Oh yeah, Reagan took me aside and said, would you help us if there's an alien invasion?" And he was dead serious. And nobody in the room knew how to handle that. But this is interesting. So if you put those data points together, it explains that Iran Contra thing a lot better.
Right. So if that was the case, you go back to the guys who started sort of getting all the covert money and doing the organized crime, and what you hear from all of them was it was the best of all the bad alternatives. We had to get the money. We had to keep it secret. So the question is why? Why do they have to get the money? Why do they have to keep it secret? What was that all about? So, and a lot of the frustration you see in the leadership is what happens when people get put in these vicious double binds because of the secrecy. They know, but they can't tell us. And so, we've watched for many, many years these ridiculous marketing plans. So COVID-19 is sort of the big global reset marketing plan. The magic virus. Oh, there's no money in Social Security. Oh, it's the COVID-19.
Yeah.
It's the magic virus that extinguishes all problems.
And you pointed out that it only goes after people when they're protesting at like a Trump rally or something, not when they're protesting for PLN.
It's so funny. There's this wonderful group that I saw their picture. They went out. They were tired of not being able to go to church. So they went out and had a worship protest.
Yes.
So they're out in the park having a praise and worship service, and the cops come and they say, you're not allowed to do this. You're not allowed to have church. And they said, oh no, it's a protest. We're having a protest. We're having a worship protest. And the cops said, okay, and left and let them do their protest.
That's the way you do it.
Right. Right. As long as we're fighting, it's okay.
Exactly. Well, Catherine, you've mentioned that there's something else behind this COVID-19 story.
There is an element of what we're dealing with that is highly, I would say it's both demonic and Bolshevik.
Right.
If you look at the facts, so I go back to the Rockefellers plus the arrogant organized mobster guys. So if you take the both WASP organized crime and Jewish organized crime and you meld them, they basically finance the Bolsheviks who go into Russia and kill. If you read Solzhenitsyn, the different estimates are 50 to 80 million Christians. That was the great genocide of the 20th century.
Absolutely. It was horrifying.
If you look at what's going on with burning churches and shutting down churches all around the world, this is a real Bolshevik push. It's very serious.
Yes.
One thing I want to mention to you, there's been tremendous effort by the government to get the churches financially dependent on either the government or their financing.
Right.
The churches are being thrown into debt entrapment too.
Well, they did that with the post office, and now it's a mess, of course. Let's address California Governor Newsom's attack on churches here. Now, Newsom has been one of the most draconian of the whole bunch of these governors that we've seen do some crazy dictator actions, from Cuomo.
And I just have to say, Nancy Pelosi says she's a Catholic, but yet she wants to shut these churches down. She wants to end the voice of Christians. She wants to silence them. She wants to put them out of the way. And Biden wants to replace it with the Muslim teaching, the Quran, which is against Christian values. But Biden literally wants to put this in schools. He wants to teach the Muslim Islamic religion in schools. He said it himself. You can look it up. And you can't, Christian prayer and the Christian Holy Bible is not allowed in schools. But Biden wants to put this in. Folks, they're trying to do away with religion, with the Christian religion, the true religion, and put in the Quran and the Islamic Muslim religion. And with that comes Sharia law. And that's when the shit hits the fan. That's when, if you don't agree with them, if you don't get down on your knees and pray to their God, they'll decapitate you. They'll kill you. They'll torture you. They'll do whatever they got to do to get rid of you, because they want this whole world to be a Muslim world. But with our Lord and Savior, this ain't going to happen. He'll come back before this happens and wipe it out. So I'm just saying that this is end time stuff, the depopulation, people trying to cancel out Christianity. This is all end times predictions.
And Whitmer, etc. But Newsom did something even more unusual than just a martial law pose. He banned singing in churches. So I guess this question is more esoteric, really, than anything else. What's behind that kind of measure?
Stop reaching the divine. I mean, you're trying to kill the relationship between the divine and the sacred and the human.
Yeah.
And singing is very important to achieving and building that field. You know, it's very interesting. If you've ever been in a revival where you're all singing and worshiping in praise together, it is astonishing how together you go into a much more, not just a higher mind, but a much more powerful mind. And you have access to all sorts of knowledge and intelligence that you don't have without that. And it's quite astonishing.
Right.
How powerful it is for the shared intelligence. So what you're trying to do is stop people from getting together and leveraging their intelligence with shared intelligence. So you're trying to destroy the field. When it was very interesting, because I had read and studied a lot about morphogenic fields before I went into the litigation with the federal government. And I was astonished because I wasn't quite sure. It all made perfect sense to me, particularly given what I'd seen in terms of financial patterns.
Yes, and Catherine, I just want to tell everybody we've had some wild audio interference today.
What is going on there? Anyway, it's like a radio show conversation behind us. Can you hear it?
Yes. Yeah.
We're going to continue to move on in any case.
Okay, so I believed them and that they made sense, but I really wasn't confident in that opinion. And then I went into the litigation and I saw every way with media, legally, they were trying to cut me off from the field. They didn't want me to be able to teach the field, and they didn't want me to get support from the field. So isolation was an absolutely critical strategy, but it was very much related to the morphogenic field and making sure I couldn't lever my intelligence, whether it was with my own computers or with the field. Right. So they are doing everything they can to shut down the morphogenic field of humans. They want every human to connect directly with the machine and resonate with the machine and not resonate with the living beings and things around them, including, first and foremost, people. Remember, we communicate through shared intelligence without speaking. In other words, you can, by being in a field and with people in a variety of different ways, you can transfer knowledge and share intelligence, electromagnetically, if you were.
Right.
And they want to shut all that down.
Right. Well, we have seen the strange emphasis of turning children against parental decisions and trying to make them loyal to this transhumanist state. And so they may have seen that they need to start them young to get them plugged in early to this Internet of Things that they're going to roll out.
Well, you can mind control them. You can do surveillance with AI.
And I've talked about this before too. How the kids in school are being taught the far left agenda, the liberalism, and now you got parents and kids not agreeing on politics anymore. If you're a Trump supporter, you know this all too well. But yeah, your kids will disown you. Man, I'm living proof of that. If you have anything to do with the Republican or Conservative Party, your kids are against you. That's the ones that are out there, the snowflakes that are out there with BLM, Antifa, and all them. They're part of it. They're in these BLM and they're in this Antifa terrorist groups. Our kids are in there. From the 20 to 30s, these kids, even below, they're still being taught that liberal idea. And if you got kids in high school, you need to pay attention, because they're being taught this liberal idea that your parents are wrong. Everything your parents say is wrong. You're right. They're dumbing them down with all this dumb crap. They're dumbing them down with all these computers, their iPhones and all this. They're dumbing these kids down so they will listen and be controlled by the far left. And that far left is the Democrat Party. They want big government, total control, and they got these kids blinded thinking that everything will be free. And it's not. It's not going to be free. You're not going to have free college. You're not going to get paid to be home on your butt. You have to get out there and get a job. But these kids are not being taught that. They're being taught wrong. And we as parents need to stop that. We need to open our mouth. We need to be heard that we want this shit out of our schools. These kids deserve better than that. And, it goes all the way back to freshmen, all the way up through college. They're being taught this. And now you got these 20 up to 30-year-olds, members of Black Lives Matter, members of Antifa. The snowflakes support all this. And, that's Generation Z. They're all supporting this violence, this looting, this stealing, and all this that's going on. And it's part of the Democrats' plan and their lobbyists, those rich people from overseas that shouldn't be involved in anything to do with America. They're involved with all that because the Democrat Party gets kickbacks. They get billions of dollars. That's how they have these $1 million mansions. That's how they have these $24,000 appliances in their home and eat $15 a quart ice cream. Nancy Pelosi. But yeah, it's all coming to light, guys. And we, as American citizens, the population, the patriots, have to stand up, voice our concerns, get this out there, let people know what's going on.
And you can figure out how you want to educate and use them. So this is, this is to give the machine total access to assessing, managing, manipulating, and taking them over.
Absolutely. There are, of course, some very deep motives with all of this, which don't show on the surface at all. What do you think is a good way to describe the process that's underway?
One of the things I will say is the people who run this system, in my experience, are brilliant at personnel management. So, they're deciding as they watch all these kids over the surveillance systems, who's going to provide adrenochrome, who's going to go into pedophilia, who's going to be groomed for Harvard to become a CEO. So this is a very sophisticated personnel system, and they're trying to figure out how to optimize the use of their resources.
And what you're saying is that we are their resources.
I come back to livestock management.
Yeah.
It's livestock management, and unfortunately, their number one asset that they're going to optimize is their human livestock.
And that livestock will be plugged into this system, and their every move will be tracked by satellite. And as we've seen with the social credit score in places like China, etc., will be ranked as a dissident for being independent or rewarded for being a conformist.
I don't know, because here's the question: how many people do they want?
Right, and that gets to the depopulation question.
Right.
Which you've brought up many times.
Right. So how many people do they want, and what do they want those people to do? And I don't think they have the answers to all those questions. This is part of a perpetual prototyping process. And but it very much relates to bringing in robotics. Now, there are all sorts of very unusual theories and unique theories about why they would behave this way. And I have no idea if any of them are true or not. But they come back to the question of, do aliens exist and live among us? So David Jacobs' theories on what's going on. But they also have to do with space travel. So, one of the theories is, they want to put these kind of operating systems in us and get more heavy metal into us so we can tolerate long space rides. And this is all part of readapting our bodies to become part of a multiplanetary civilization. Now, I have no idea. It makes no sense to me. I don't know.
But what you're saying is this isn't just some corporate scheme to make money. The veins in all of this run a lot deeper than that.
The goal here is not for pharmaceutical companies to make money or for Bill Gates to make money. The goal here is to re-engineer the human body so that it can be managed, directed, and mind-controlled from a machine and integrated into an AI-controlled system.
Right.
I mean, this is transhumanism. Their goal is transhumanism, and the question is why?
Catherine, you've hit upon the main question that we need to be asking ourselves in the middle of all of this chaos. Incredible insights on all of this, and we're going to keep going deeper with part 3. Now, I want to point out that your new Solari report is available at solari.com, and I can't recommend it enough. Thank you for joining us, and remember to visit darkjournalist.com for more, and we'll see you Fridays at 8 p.m. for the X series. See you soon.
Guys, you can take this with a grain of salt, or you can take it as factual. But I do know one thing for sure. This stuff is really happening, and they're really trying it, and they're trying some of it with military soldiers. I know that for a fact. And they ain't trying to hide that because they got videos on it. But they are trying to hide the fact of depopulation. They want to depopulate this, mostly America, and some around the world. And they want to turn us into robots, the ones who they keep. Now, just keep that in mind, the ones who they want on Earth with them, they want to turn them into AI so they can control every aspect of them. It's getting real, guys. It's really getting real, and it's sad. But they say Bill Gates, it's not about money for Bill Gates. Well, probably not. But it's about money to the rest of these guys, these big bankers, these evil bankers. And the Democrat Party is probably right in there mixed up with all this. I know it is. Nancy Pelosi is, Chuck Schumer is. And that's why, and you know, that's why they push so hard to get Trump out of office. That's why they come up with all these lies. And they're going to keep doing it. They're going to keep doing it. If he gets elected next year, they're going to continue doing the same thing. Unless Trump gets all this other stuff out that I posted and everybody else is posting out to the public, and then we get rid of this Democrat Party. But that's the only way we're going to get rid of them, is to squash them. We have to squash them out. They're evil. They want our kids to only know what they want them to know now. If you've noticed your child acts a lot different now that you try to explain something to them, they're like, no, that ain't the way it is. Well, that's because they're being dumbed down they're being mind controlled. They're feeding their minds with lies, trying to control them so they can take hold of these kids and control them. They want to control these kids, and they're doing a good job of it, because now you see child rising up against parent, just like the Bible said it would do. You're seeing all this chaos out there in the streets. The Bible said it would happen. This is end time stuff. I mean, it's all end time stuff. And for some reason, nobody's listening to it. I don't know if you're listening or not, but I've been paying attention and watching. I'll have more on this too if you're interested. But I just wanted to say, hit that like button and share down below. Subscribe if you haven't already. And for those of you who support the channel, God bless you. I appreciate it. And have a good day.